Hi. So I've gotten a few questions about the standards and the bilingual Common Core progression linguistic demands and how to use them or apply them into this lesson plan. And so I wanted to give an explanation for that because if you're not familiar with using standards or planning with standards, I can totally see how that would be overwhelming. So my first suggestion, especially if you're newer to lesson planning, is you definitely want to I would start here and think about your day's objectives, so what you want students to learn or do and their language demands that might connect to that. And remember that this lesson you really want to be focused on speaking and building those collaboration and speaking communication skills. I would also, focus on the actual lesson plan and what you want your students to be doing. This is the funner part of lesson planning, where you get to be creative and fun. And so you might want to start there and work backwards. So for this video, I'm going to use the example of the polar bear article. And so I'm going to plan my lesson around that article. So this might be lesson number 3, in which students have now entered the classroom. They've already read that polar bear article. They already have prior knowledge on global warming and climate change. So in this lesson, I want students to work in a group, and I want them to be able, with their group, to identify 3 key details that support a main idea that I am going to give them. I'm going to provide them with a main idea. They're going to work in small groups, and they're going to choose 3 supporting details with their group members. Maybe they put them on sentence strips. Maybe if it's online, maybe they put them in a Padlet. So I'd think of some sort of interactive, fun way for them to produce the 3 key details. So now thinking about that activity, I'm going to choose which standards that connects best with. So I'm going to go back up. I'm going to click on my link, and that's going to take you to this page. And you're going to, it'll actually take you to this page, and I'm going to choose English Language Arts Standards. If you're planning a math lesson, you would choose math standards, but for this, I'm choosing English Language Arts Standards. Then it takes you to this page. I suggest scrolling right to the bottom for the at a glance. That's the easiest way to read these standards. This lesson I'm planning is going to be for grade 3. So now I've gone here, and I'm going to scroll down to this standard. I've just scrolled down. And I've chosen this one because I'm focusing on speaking and listening, and I'm focusing on grade 3, right? This is grade 4 if you're planning for grade 4. This is grade 5. If you notice, the one above it is for writing, but I'm not doing writing in this lesson. I'm doing speaking and collaborative group work. That's my focus for the day. That's my day's objective, is to build on students' communication, listening, and speaking skills. So now I'm on speaking and listening, standard 1, right? S, speaking, L, listening, standard 1. 3 is grade 3. This is the standard, and underneath it are the different strands, A, B, C, D, E. So this is more specific. These are specific skills that they can practice within this standard. So for this one, I would say this makes a lot of sense for my lesson, because students are coming to the discussions having read the article, and they're going to draw on that information to explore ideas under discussion with their group. And let's just say in today's lesson, I also really want students to focus on asking questions. I might set the expectation that everybody in the group has to ask and answer at least one question. And so now I've chosen my standard and my 2 strands. And I would put those right in here. You only really need to choose one standard because it's just one lesson. So you can't do too much in one lesson. Next, I'm going to go to my bilingual Common Core standards. So I'm going to click on that, and that is going to take you to this page. And this is not formatted ideally, but so now I've chosen my standard 1, right? I chose standard 1 for Common Core. So now it's going to download, and I'm going to unzip the file, and you'll see it looks like this. Standard 1, I'm focusing on speaking and listening. And then notice it's just broken down by grades. I'm focusing on grade 3. So I'm going to open that up. And it looks like this. You'll notice that here it is the same thing that we just saw. We just read all of this. And really all this is doing is then breaking it down for you. So it's meant to be helpful, and it's meant to be inclusive of English language learners, since they're not spoken about in the next generation standards. They're highlighted here in the bilingual linguistic demands. Remember, for this lesson, I wanted you to really focus on those lower level English language learners. And so you might choose your linguistic demands here. I also want you to notice over here, it says receptive. Scroll down. On the next page is productive. So receptive might be listening or reading, right? Notice these are all listening and reading, because they're receiving the information. The next page is the productive linguistic demands, because they're producing language. So again, I really want to focus more on speaking in today's lesson. And so that's what I'm going to focus on. And if I'm focusing on my entering L's, then maybe I've pre-identified words and phrases on the front board. And I want students to follow the rules in collaborative conversation. So basically, you're just pulling straight from this, and then you would tweak it or change it to match your lesson. Or if you're focusing more on the emerging, then maybe you would tweak this to fit your lesson. This does not fit my lesson perfectly whatsoever. And so I would change it to better fit my lesson. But I don't want you to get too stressed out about the bilingual Common Core linguistic demands, because it really is just it's just there to highlight different ways you can scaffold this standard, right? This is the standard that you're hoping that your students are working towards, that they're meeting this standard of engaging effectively in collaborative discussion. And then what New York State has done is broken it down into ways that entering L's might meet that standard versus commanding L's might meet that standard. It's going to look very different. The way an entering ELL meets a standard is going to look and sound very different than when a commanding ELL meets that standard. And that's really the purpose of these bilingual linguistic demands documents, is to encourage and highlight ways of scaffolding and ways of modifying expectations, so that we're, being thoughtful about that ZPD, or zone of proximal development. So I don't want you to stress too much over these, but that's the easiest way you'd go about it, is choose your next generation standard first, and then go to the bilingual, wherever that is. Sorry. Common Core progressions, choose whichever standard you chose, then you choose the grade, and it'll bring you to the document that looks like this. So hopefully you find that helpful. If you still have questions, certainly email me. And again, your objectives, last note is that your objectives are going to somewhat connect to your standards, right? So my day's objective, my content objective, students will be able to identify key details to support a main idea. Maybe I also, in my day's objective, want students to be able to identify the effects of global warming on polar bears. Those might be my 2 content objectives. Whereas my language, that's your linguistic demand, might be students will be able to effectively engage in collaborative group work by listening and responding to their peers, students will be able to effectively contribute to group work by asking thoughtful questions based on a previously read text. So notice how this really is focusing on your language, and this is focusing more on the skill or content. So hopefully that's helpful.